he got to Yirmiyahu, in his commentary on Yirmiyahu, Perek Chaf Tet, when he got to this passage, he wondered, like anybody would have wondered, who on earth are these two people? And how come we don't hear a word about their false prophecies? Exactly as Chazal explained in Sanhedrin 93a. And here's what Jerome said. This is very interesting. The Hebrews say that these are the elders who wrought folly in Israel and committed adultery with the wives of their fellow citizens. What's different already? Fellow citizens. Right? We have to medactic on every word here. So he heard from the Jews that it wasn't Nebuchadnezzar's daughter or wife and these different, and by the way, we have Hebrew accounts also, that it was Jews. So he has the account that it was the wives of their fellow citizens, and to one of whom Daniel said, O you who are grown old in evil days. That's in Susanna. So he heard from the Jews that, yes, they know about this story, and they know about these two prophets mentioned in the book of Jeremiah, and these are the prophets. These are the two Shoftim mentioned in the book of Susanna. And the other of whom he said, You seed of Canaan and not of Judah, beauty has deceived you, and lust has perverted your heart. Thus you did to the daughters of Israel, and they in fear spoke with you, but a daughter of Judah did not abide your iniquity, meaning Susanna. This is all a quote from Susanna. And that which the prophet now says, and they have spoken a word in my name falsely, which I did not command them, is Jeremiah 29:23. The Jews think that this is indicated by the fact that Ahab and Zedekiah thus deceived wretched women, who are carried about by every wind of doctrine, by saying to them, because they were of the tribe of Judah, the Messiah must be born of their seed, who having been enticed by desire, furnished their bodies as if they were future mothers of the Messiah. It's very interesting. What he heard from Jews was that these two prophets came and turned to Susanna or to other women and would entice those women to engage in sexual relations with them because they told them, you have been selected for the honor of being the mother of the Mashiach. And we, of course, will be the father of the Mashiach. Excuse me? The same. He uses the term Hebraio. Hebraio, Yudaio. It's the same. But that which is said at present, whom the king of Babylon roasted in fire. This is Jerome talking now. But that which is said at present, whom the king of Babylon roasted in fire. Take a look, Jeremiah 29:22. Seems to contradict the history of Daniel, meaning Susanna. For he asserts that they were stoned by the people according to the option of Daniel. In the book of Susanna it says, they did to them as they wanted to do, and they were stoned to death. But what does it say in Yirmiyahu about these two false prophets? Asher kolam, you have the verse in front of you? Beish. Whence this fable, we'll talk about it in a minute, whence this fable, the book of Susanna as it were, is not accepted by very many. So Jerome says there are many who don't accept this book, including almost all the Hebrews. Including almost all the Hebrews. Most Jews don't accept the book of Susanna. Nor is it read in their synagogues. For they say, and now he's quoting the Jews in the quote, for they say, now, what would you think the Jews said? If, in light of everything we said, what should the Jews have said? Why don't they quote this book? Why don't they read this book? Why do they reject this book? Yeah, because this is not Adam's own. This is not even there's no Imanu Yisam here. What are we talking about here? That's not what Jerome says. He asked the Jews, and the Jews said, for they say, how could it be that captives had the power of stoning their leaders and prophets? The Jews were captive in this period. This is during the time of the Nebuchadnezzar. You think that in Bavel the Jews had the right capital punishment? Unheard of. And more than this, they affirm to be true that which Jeremiah writes, that the elders indeed were refuted by Daniel, but that sentence was brought against them by the king of Babylon. It says in Yirmiyahu, says very clearly, who put them to death, and how were they put to death? They were burnt to death, and who put them to death? That's right, the Melech Bavel. who had the power against the captives as victor and lord. He was able to implement capital punishment. Therefore, Sefer Shoshana, the book of Susanna, cannot be part of the biblical canon. This is the testimony given Jerome, what he heard from Jews. Here he doesn't say rabbis, sometimes he does, but what he heard from the Hebrews, that usually means the rabbis, as to why this book was not included in the biblical canon. Now, no. They're not going to worry about such niceties, right? He doesn't talk about that. It happens to be a beautiful book. I mean, you read it, you'll see. It's hard. You can't put it down once you start reading it. But in any event, what I want to focus on what should be our concern here. What interests me here is that even though Maratz Chayes is eminently logical, everything he said is absolutely true, and it was repeated then by every scholar who ever wrote and got into all the biblical handbooks through 1997. When you examine the evidence, it turns out that there were other concerns that concerned the Jews in antiquity, very important concerns, by the way, and those were the primary concerns, apparently, at least as recorded in the early literature, as to why this book was not included in Tanakh.